Chris arrived at the interview for a Fortune 500 company, wearing clothes splattered with paint. The manager who had invited him was surprised. Chris smiled and shook hands with everyone, while the company's boss looked at him with disdain. The manager was at a loss. Chris considered making up an excuse for his appearance but ultimately decided to tell the truth. He explained that he had been detained by the police for not paying his parking tickets due to a lack of money. The manager found his honesty amusing, but the boss remained displeased. Looking at Chris's meager resume, the boss questioned whether he was qualified for the job. Chris knew he couldn't avoid the question and responded, "If you ask me something I don't know, I'll tell you straight up. I don't know, but I know how to find the answer, and I will find it." The interviewers were still unimpressed. They threw out a final, difficult question. If a man showed up to an interview without even wearing a shirt, what would you think? It was clearly meant to give Chris a hard time. Chris cleverly replied, "Well, his pants must be pretty impressive." This answer amused the boss, who appreciated Chris's optimism. Chris performed well in the interview and was accepted, but there was an unexpected catch. The internship was unpaid, and only 1 out of 20 candidates would be selected. There was just a 5% chance of being hired permanently. Chris considered giving up, as he needed to support his family. He called the manager, ready to decline, but the manager told him, "If you don't seize this opportunity, I'll immediately give it to someone else." The manager asked for an answer by that evening. That night, Chris's wife brought their son back. She planned to leave Chris and find work in a big city. After some thought, Chris decided to take the chance. He still had 6 medical devices, and if he sold them all, he could make it through the 6-month internship. The next day, they moved into a cheap motel. While playing ball with his son, Chris shared a life lesson: if you have a dream, you've got to protect it. Soon, all 6 medical devices were sold, and life seemed to be improving gradually. When Chris noticed his son wanting chocolate, the boy considerately declined. Understanding their situation, the internship began, and their job was to make calls to clients, promoting financial plans. The more sales they made, the better their performance, and the higher their chances of getting the job. Because Chris was black, the training manager often asked him to pick up takeout orders. Chris had no choice but to agree, knowing he had to work 3 times harder than others to win the job. Every day, Chris had to leave 3 hours early to pick up his son from school, traveling across the entire city. To save time, he made sales calls without pause, hanging up one call and immediately dialing the next client. He never drank water to avoid wasting time going to the bathroom. One day, Chris called a major client who gave him 20 minutes to come and discuss business in person. Chris immediately rushed to meet the client but encountered the training manager halfway. The manager asked Chris to park his car for him. Chris had no choice but to agree. When he found the car, the door was difficult to open, wasting a lot of time. By the time Chris arrived at the client's office, he was too late. To make matters worse, when he returned, the manager's car had been given a parking ticket, which Chris had to pay himself. That weekend, Chris took his son to the client's house to apologize. The client felt it was unnecessary, but Chris sincerely explained the reason for his tardiness. Impressed by Chris's sincerity, the client invited them to watch a football game. Chris gladly accepted. In the VIP box, Chris marveled at the experience, expressing his gratitude to the client. He confidently introduced his company's products. Although the client admired Chris, he wouldn't allow their company to manage the funds. Despite not gaining this particular client, Chris made more connections and met more potential customers in need of his services. Things seemed to be slowly improving until the day he received a letter that brought him back to reality. The government had forcibly collected taxes, taking all the money from his bank account.